Hello, lovely people, and welcome back to my little home studio space here. So I'm making this video because it's one that I've wanted to make for a long time, and I haven't had the time until now. And the universe has blessed me, blessed all of us, with all of this time. So it feels like a really good time to make this video and to kind of see what you guys think of it. So if you guys have met me or taken a workshop with me or a class with me, you'll know that I am a huge anatomy nerd. I'm a biologist, and I also I'm an anatomy professor as well. So my passion really lies in kind of melding our understanding of anatomy from a Western viewpoint with the wisdom of knowledge from a more Eastern viewpoint. So melding them together and really kind of finding that sweet spot where we can experience the anatomy in our yoga practice. And by that I mean experience the sensations in our bodies in the yoga practice. So I have done a good amount of studying with my anatomy gurus, which are Judith Lasater and Mary Richards. And they have continued to challenge me in understanding how our deepening of the anatomy, the anatomical constructs, the anatomical reality of the body can really help to support our yoga practice. So that's what I am using to guide the video I'm making for you today and any that I make in the future in this same kind of thread of videos. So if you've taken my workshops at Dragonfly, this is going to be very similar to that, kind of in the same vein of using an anatomical body reality perspective to find a little more deepening in our yoga practice. And I think that there's a huge space here for us, with those of us with more Western bodies, to really adapt the yoga practice to serve us and to meet us where we are. Because if we know anything, it's that yoga meets us where we are. So I'm calling this video Pose Perspective. And what I mean by that is it's just to help you gain some perspective on some probably pretty familiar poses or asanas or postures. And the first one we're going to start with today is Utkatasana, which is chair pose. And like I said, this is a posture that you've probably done many times in yoga classes, and you might love it, you might hate it. There seems to be a kind of a difference of sensation in different people. But hopefully what we talk about today can help you find some ease no matter where you are on that spectrum. And no matter how long you've been practicing this posture, this pose, my hope is that you can gain something from what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so let's talk about chair pose. So let's get on our mats. And I like to cue or kind of examine my chair pose from the ground up, because it really is a grounding pose. It really is something that helps you root down into your support, root down into your feet, into the earth, stimulating that first chakra, that I am energy, and to really kind of ground you in the present moment. So I like to start from the feet up. So I like to start my chair pose with the feet hip-width distance apart, and I'll just tell you why. I've mentioned this for a moment here. I know that there are many different styles of yoga. Some styles of yoga like to keep chair pose with the necks of the big toes together and the heels like a thumbprint distance apart. And my challenge with this foot position, especially having a Western body myself, is that it really doesn't feel supportive in my hips and in my sacroiliac joint here. And seeing as it's a grounding posture and it's one that is designed to feel supportive, it feels a little at odds with the yogic experience, that I feel like I'm kind of on a tightrope or on a little tiny platform, when really my hips want to be wide. My legs want to support me in these hips. So that's how I like to begin it. And you can experiment with this. Please try it with feet together and with feet hip-width distance apart. And when I say hip-width distance, we're not talking about the hips as the ASIS, the hip bones right here. We're talking about the hips as these old things, these fleshy parts. Okay, so this is your hip distance. So I like to take my standing poses with feet hip-width distance apart, like I said, to help protect the sacroiliac joint. Okay, the pelvis is a bony ring, and we want to give it space to move as it wants to move. So you may have experienced this in a yoga class where you may take a posture like high lunge, and if your feet are really on a tightrope, meaning they're almost in line with each other, you might feel a little unbalanced. You might even feel like your sacroiliac joint is torqued or twisted. I certainly do when I take this pose. So I like to keep my feet hip-width distance apart, widen the feet, widen the base, and that allows my pelvis to move naturally, okay, to find its space. And our pelvis has kind of the supreme intelligence for where it wants to be. Our mind can overthink this and override it, but in my experience, overriding the natural movements of the body with the thinking mind leads to discomfort and pain, at least in my experience. So when we start with the feet hip-width distance apart, it really allows us to get a wide base of support to ground us so that we can reach up into our chair pose. And I have a lovely chair here as my assistant to demonstrate the orientation of the hips in chair pose. So first of all, let me grab my chair. And just a quick little aside, when I talk about a Western body, what I'm talking about is an American, even Eastern or Western European, where our culture is such that we tend to sit a lot during the day. And when we're not sitting, we might be standing and looking at our phones or looking down. And what that does, if we sit in our chairs, is most of us don't sit in the chairs on the very edge where we allow our backs to support us. It's tiring on these big old muscles of the back, the erector spinae. So what we tend to do is we tend to sit back in the chair and sit more like this, which does relax the erector spinae, but it puts a lot of strain on these muscles of the lower back. Okay, the erector spinae get fatigued very quickly, but the psoas, these lower back muscles, they can support you here all day. Okay, they're used for walking, they're used for standing, they're slower twitch muscle fibers with high endurance. So when we sit in a proper configuration here where we're supporting ourselves with the psoas and the erectors are not as taut, it's more sustainable. But we're not going to talk about seated posture today. Maybe we'll do that another time. But so we tend to sit like this with the low back rounded, the tailbone tucked under, and we type with our head down and our neck pitched forward. The neck and the low back have a sympathetic relationship. Okay, so when I tuck my chin, my low back rounds and my tailbone tucks as well. When I extend my chin and my neck, my low back naturally extends. Okay, so think about that. This is cat-cow, right? This is seated cat-cow. Tuck your chin, tuck your tailbone into cat, press the chest forward, extend the neck, extend the low back, cow. So this is the movement that is allowing us to tap into the natural pelvic movements. Okay, the pelvis needs to be able to move against the spine. This is called nutation, means nodding. So the pelvis nods forward and it nods back. And we want to keep this movement when we come into chair pose. Okay, so chair pose, I'll show you first from the chair, hence the name. So my feet are hip-width distance apart, and when I go to stand up, so maybe I'm sitting like this and my tailbone tucked under, I can't stand up with my tailbone tucked under. Okay, you have to have really strong quads to do that, and I don't want to hurt myself trying. So if I want to stand up, I need to allow my pelvis to nutate forward. I'm bringing my center of gravity over my feet, and then I can stand up. And look, chair pose. Okay? So what I'm doing, I'm going to show you now from the top down, is when I come into chair pose, maybe I come from mountain, feet hip-width apart, inhale the breath, and as I exhale, I sit back like there's a chair behind me. That's exactly the same motion as if I were going to actually sit into a chair. My pelvis is doing the exact same thing. It's nutating forward, because look at what's happening in my upper back. My upper back in chair pose is extended. My neck is extended. If I try to override what my pelvis naturally wants to do by tucking the tailbone, I'm making a schizophrenic relationship in the spine, because we said the neck and the low back are sympathetic. When my neck is extended, my low back wants to extend too. This is cow pose, right? And when I tuck my chin, my low back wants to flex and curl the tailbone under. This is cat pose. So don't override the natural intelligence of your hips. Let your hips move. They know what they're doing, okay? So when we sit back into chair pose, we can bring the hands forward and sit down into your chair. Now, this might be a lot on the knees, and if it is, we don't have to take full chair. We can use a seat to help us work into this. Okay, so this might be your chair pose for a while. It might just be working on setting up the feet and setting up the arms. Okay, you might be able to kind of lift and hover a couple times, but we're working with where we are. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to protect the knees, because if you're feeling it in the knees, there are some things we can do to help with that. So when you sit back into your chair, if you're not paying attention to what your legs are doing, you might start to feel like your inner pelvis, your groin area, is kind of taking a lot of the load, right? It might feel like you're kind of dumping into your pelvic floor. So what we can do for that is two things. Okay, so I'm keeping my feet hip-width distance apart. I'm sitting into my chair. I want to engage these outer muscles of my thigh and my glutes. These are really powerful muscles, and they're made to support you. So use them. This is also going to help support the knee, to help draw the patella into its proper groove and alignment, so that we don't have issues with slipping and all kinds of knee stuff. So we're sitting into our chair. Now I want you to imagine that your feet, the soles of your feet, are glued to the mat. Now, keeping them glued, try to draw the soles of your feet together toward the midline. Okay, you might feel a turning on here through the outer thigh and the outer glute. So what this is doing is it's bringing the weight more evenly into the hips and less into the pelvic floor and the knees. Okay, if you don't feel it when you take that cue, try this one. Sitting into your chair, keeping your legs where they are. Imagine you're trying to draw your thigh bones in toward the midline. Don't move them, just imagine. And at the same time, root down through the outer edges of your feet. Okay, again, we're looking to have this turning on feeling right here in the upper thighs, the glutes, the outer legs. Okay, so chair pose is a posture where it certainly can be taken on its own and held. In Hatha Yoga, you may do that. It can also be used as a transition pose in a vinyasa sequence. Okay, you might have, come to your chair and then forward fold. You may have come to your chair, step back to warrior one, warrior two, whatever the case may be. But in a transition, it's important that we're mindful of how the body is moving. Okay, letting it move in a way that supports itself. So, focusing on the feet, hip width distance, the knees tracking over the second toe, rooting through the feet so that we can engage the outer quads. And one of the most important things, letting the pelvis nutate or nod with the upper back body. Okay? Again, it has natural intelligence. It knows how to put you in a chair and get you out of one. So let it do that for this pose. So now that we've talked about the anatomy, let's talk about the yoga. Okay, so in your chair pose, we've said this is a grounding pose, right? You can feel that when you sit back. Feel like you have roots growing out of the soles of your feet, just deep into the soil, rooting you in place. Okay, as you inhale, imagine that you're sending energy out through the crown of your head and at the same time out through the soles of your feet. And as you exhale, it's a recoil where the energy comes back in through your feet and in through the crown of your head to kind of swirl here in the base of the pelvis. So this is a grounding pose. It's stimulating to the first chakra. The I am grounded. I am present. I am. Keeping you present in this moment so that you can focus on the sensations, really rooting down, breathing into the belly, because our belly is nice and open in this posture. If this is too much in the low back, you can always gently tuck the chin. You don't need to think about doing anything in the low back, but just by gently tucking the chin, you'll take some of that flexion out of the low back. Okay, so this is a rooting, a grounding, a posture of stability, a posture of support, a posture of presence, power. It's a powerful posture. So use those techniques, practice it on your mat. Every body is different. That could be a mantra here. Everyone's body is different. My body is not the same as yours. And while I'm talking about Western bodies, yes, we all have similarities in some ways, but every body is different. Okay, so honor that when you practice this pose. So, take some time to absorb that. I know it's a lot of information, but just take some time to work through it. Maybe set aside a couple minutes, maybe work in chair pose into your home practice and experiment with those feelings. So, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. Please, please give me some feedback, whether you loved it or hated it or anywhere in the middle. Let me know. Like I said, this is something that I've been wanting to dive into for a while, so I'd love to hear your response. And I'm doing this to serve you guys, to serve the community. Yes, it also helped me to scratch that itch of anatomy nerd in my head, so thank you. But at the same time, it's designed to help you, everyone, deepen their practice. So let me know how it goes. And if there is a posture that you'd like me to cover, if there's something that you just feel like, you know what, no matter how many times I do this in class, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right in my body. You can leave that in a comment too, because I am here to serve. That's why we're all here. That's why we're all doing this. And finally, the last thing I wanted to say was, while we're here on this kind of interlude here at home, a lot of us have had changes in our schedule. A lot of us yoga teachers have been working really hard to serve the community, to try to establish some kind of online donation, online sharing of our energy and our wisdom. And in return, you know, that benefit, that good feeling that we all feel when we really help people and when we really feel like we serve our community. So if you have the means, or if you have the desire, please consider donating to, you know, your favorite yoga teacher or your favorite yoga studio. I know a lot of them are doing this just for the enjoyment of serving, myself included. But if you are in a position to make a financial donation to your yoga teachers, your yoga studios at this challenging time, to be honest, it's greatly appreciated, and we really thank you for that. And even if you're not in a position to do that, please don't feel like it's required. It's certainly not required at all. The only thing that's required is that you continue practicing, you continue at home, spending some time on self-growth, on self-development, even if that just means breathing on your chair for 10 minutes a day. That's all that I'm requiring you to do, is to keep your practice, keep your routine. Okay, routine is so important all the time, but especially right now. So with that, I leave you all with my gratitude, and I hope to see you all very, very soon. So stay healthy and well, and I send my love and my care from my little home here. Namaste.